Welcome to those on Facebook Live and YouTube to the Home Spiritual Center Sunday service for September 8th, 2024. Right into our opening prayer. I know that God, the thing itself, this intelligent universe, is a vibration of love and is within us in every transition and every change we go through. As we enter our future, one of peace, love, tranquility, this new era before us will bring us excitement and even some anxiety. I can recall the deep compassion, presence, and abounding love I've felt in deep meditation while contemplating what it must be like to be God, the thing itself, this intelligent universe we live in, we exist in. Now, we need to take time to thank God for the gifts, the talents, and the skills we have been blessed with. Thank God for the experiences in our lives that brought us to experience this moment with friends and family around us. And let us not forget the love and the work of others that gives breadth and depth to our own work. As we move forward from this moment, smile. The journey to love is under our feet, and supporting one another is how we will arrive in peace. The Home Spiritual Center will always be there when and where you need us. We are but a thought away. In love and light, amen. Now, Reverend Madge.
All right. Thank you. I love the way you ended that. Yes, Home Center will always be there. I love that. All right. So my message today is about walking your medicine way. I still have the glow of this summer's trip up to Mount Hood Wilderness area and then making 12 drums weekend before last. It's a timeless event, so I've already lost track of my time. So anyway, yeah, earlier this summer for a week, I was up in the edge of the Mount Hood Wilderness area with Selena and her shamanic apprentices, supporting them and supporting Selena while they're on their vision quest. And it's just such a beautiful place to be, and it's so clean. And the river that goes through there is so clean that we can drink out of it all week long. And that's what Selena and I did. While the rest of them were up having their vision quest, her and I dipped into the river every day. It's the first dwelling after this water that comes down the mountain from the snow and the glaciers. Man, it was so alive, and it had just so much energy to it that that was all we would drink all week. It was wonderful. And then this moss that grows on the trees, as you know, up in where the air is so clean, that moss that hangs, sometimes they call it old man's beard moss or the lichen, you know what it is. Anyway, that was very plentiful up in that area as well. Well, when I first went to work at the hospital in Dallas, my boss at that time, who became my friend, her and her husband had been lighthouse keepers in Tillamook. And she loved that task. That's where they lived, but she was the surgical manager at the hospital in Forest Grove. So she had to drive that distance every day to go to work. And she would tell us about the old growth trees that were along that road and how magnificent they were. She loved the trees, loved nature. And she said the moss just hung clear to the ground from those branches way up high. They hung all the way down, and they would sway like ghosts in the wind as the storms would come through. She said they were just big sheets of moss. She said it was so magnificent. It was kind of spooky when they would swing. You know, the forest would be so full of these swinging things. Now at Halloween time, we're seeing that, you know, people making ghosties all the time. They're not the same, but eventually they cut all those trees down without a thought. You know, they're just plentiful everywhere, they seem to think. And they cut them all down, and her heart never stopped weeping for those trees and the beauty of what that held. But at least she knew it, she remembered it, she experienced it, and remembered it, and then shared it with all of us. And I have this visual in my head of how magnificent that was. So often I tried to imagine what our forests look like before we took all the trees down, and it came back. It's regrown. We got huge trees out there now. I mean, in our forest, our national forest, but you can still see the stumps. Even where we were up at the Mount Hood Wilderness area, there were all these stumps that were not that big now, but I could imagine how big that tree was as an old growth, being cut down. But it's still beautiful. It's hard to imagine that those trees were here at the time of Christ. Many of them were 2,000-year-old trees. So they were here at the time of Christ, and yet they're taken down without a thought. It's heartbreaking. But at least the forest is rejuvenating. It's coming back. There's some beautiful, beautiful places out there. To walk the medicine way is to walk with a beautiful walk in your mind, and to walk every day with awareness and consciousness and thoughtfulness about what you're doing. And it's a way of walking through your life. Your spirit is centered in your heart. Your heart-centered awareness, heart-centered consciousness is to walk the medicine way. And it's a feeling connected with harmony to the environment and to all life forms. And this is beyond the Bible. It's beyond any particular teachings or religious teachings of any kind. This is just us with nature, with the Mother Earth herself, with the God being of what our universe is, the fabric of the universe. It's a way of being in your integrity, a way of being with your open heart, is to walk the medicine way. And it's your personal walk with spirit, where you walk softly, not only on the land and in the environment, but also on the hearts of others, is to walk the medicine way. You walk with purpose and intent, and you're taking the next step because you have the faith in knowing that the next step is going to be good. May not understand it, but it's going to be good. The word manya is a word that comes from the shamans from the Andes. And it's it's the name of a rite and ritual of initiation into the medicine way that the Andean shamans do for those that are up and coming. And that word means I love you, or be as thou art. Isn't that beautiful? They initiate their shamans into a rite of being a loving human. I love you, be as thou art. I wanted to say it again because it's just such a warm feeling. In our beingness, it's who we really are on the inside, and it's who we want to be on the inside. And how are you being in your relations? It's a time of evaluation, looking inside. How am I being with my relations? How are you being in your loving, in your words and your actions? Be as thou art. Be present with the Spirit of God that you're illuminous with. You're illuminating the love of God with the love of presence of that love. The prophecies of the ancient Americas speak about a new human appearing on the planet. Isn't that interesting? It wasn't just Barbara Marx Hubbard that coined that word. The ancient prophecies of long ago have been prophesizing the new human. So it's not just a new age term or mumbo jumbo kind of coined up word, sound fancy. They've been speaking of this for a long time. So the ancient prophecies, they speak of this new human as one who lives free of fear and resides in his or her transcendent nature. The new human that which we are evolving into is so magnificent and beautiful. And each and every one of you are already magnificent and beautiful. It's not something you're becoming, it's something you already are. But in the process of evolution, of evolving spiritually, we're becoming more magnificent and more beautiful because we're recognizing what we really have within us, and we're expressing it, we're connecting with it and living by it. So we are becoming more light. Our light is shining brighter, and we're becoming more loving in our hearts, and we can hold ourselves with that fearlessly, as the ancient prophecies say, without fear, emptied of judgment, emptied of fear, but filled with compassion, hope, and love. Our ancients, or our ancestors, would walk through the forests and they would observe the signs in nature for assistance and for healing and for guidance. And they listened to the wind and they listened to the water and they listened to the birds and the animals. They would notice what animals crossed their path, which ones showed up. I know a story of a woman. She says every time she gets lost, this is before the days of our GPSs, she would just put a call out to nature and then she would see where the crow showed up and which way it was pointing. And she would go that way. And it worked for her. She had that kind of communication. I thought, man, I'm scared to try it. I don't know where I'll end up. But she did, and it worked for her. But the ancestors, our ancestors, they drank from the waters. That was why it was so exciting to me to be able to just drink right out of a river, dunk my little vessel in there and pull the water out and just drink it alive, not going through pipes and sanitation and chemicals, because I felt so connected to the spirit of the water, but also of the area of the trees. Everything was taking in that same water. We all became a part of each other. They understood very deeply that that same water became a part of their body. And they understood very deeply that as they ate the deer or the meat of the animals with which they would take in for food, that that animal now is a part of them and a part of their body. And they understood very deeply that when they passed away, that their body would deteriorate, their flesh and their bones would become part of the dirt. And that dirt would now become part of the grass that would the next generation of animals would eat. And that would feed their next generation. And they understood very deeply this beautiful cycle of life, of rising up and partaking and appreciating and then declining and going back into the cycle. And it was a beautiful way to live. And it's that circle of and cycle of oneness with all that is around us. And that cycle hasn't changed. It hasn't changed a bit. And it's time we bring back that conscious awareness and deep gratitude for this amazing cycle of life. And to kind of live by that. Even we don't have to speak of it, but we can feel it. We can appreciate it. It's easy to remember the beauty of this cycle when you're immersed in the forest and drinking out of a river, drinking out of the stream, when we're in the natural environment among the trees. But we don't have to live in the middle of beauty to see beauty. And that's where the challenge comes. That's where it becomes quite difficult, or can be. I'm working on seeing the beauty in going up and down Lancaster Drive these days. That's life. That's the reality. The homelessness, the crazy drivers. How do you see the beauty in that? You have to search. There's sometimes these crows that are alongside and they seem to be talking to each other. We just had a little, the young crows have now grown up, but for a while there, it was fun to drive along and see the fledglings chasing after their parents. I'm looking for the beauty along Lancaster. It's there. I just know it. I got to find it. There's a quote from the book called From Beauty and the Soul by Piero. Oh, I learned how to say his name and now I've forgotten it. Anyway, it's Ferrucci. I think it is Ferrucci. They pronounced it with a rolled R. I don't know how to do that. Anyway, he says, this is a beautiful quote. He says, aesthetic intelligence is about where and how well you are able to perceive beauty. It is a capacity akin to tuning in. Some people can see beauty almost anywhere, while others anchor to familiar, assuring experiences. These with a limited aesthetic range have not only been more restricted in the world, but also a personality which is less rich and flexible. I thought that is so true. You know, you can think of your cranky neighbor that has nothing good to say. Everybody's had one of those at some point in time, you know, and they don't see the beauty, but even though there may be beauty around, they don't see it. So it's your aesthetic intelligence. We have our emotional intelligence, our intellectual intelligence, but there's also an aesthetic intelligence that allows us to see beauty in the world. So I think we need to pay attention to our aesthetic intelligence, our aesthetic IQ. You might be missing on some beauty in your life that's right in front of you. Seeing the beauty in the midst of turmoil can be very difficult, but it's still possible. And I know people do it sometimes. And sometimes it's hard to relate when you're all in a state of, going sideways over the turmoil in the world, and somebody's sitting there telling you what's beautiful. You almost want to get mad at them, don't you? I mean, there's times it's like, just be quiet. I'm in my moment. I'm in my struggle. But if we can find it within us, it doesn't mean we have to share it with people that aren't ready to hear it, but we can still feel it. The feeling of that beauty still radiates. It still has an impact. I've shared this story before, but it feels relevant here. And it's a time that I was driving through downtown Salem, and I was coming up Liberty Street, and I come up to where Rite Aid used to be on the corner there, and there was this young girl that was sitting on the ground there, leaning up against the building, and she was only 15 or 16 years old, and she was quite dirty and awful looking. But I could see through that, just even in the flash, that she was a beautiful girl. It was just the life she was living that made her not look so good. And she was sitting on the sidewalk there in a stupor, and she was slumped over. I'm guessing she had drug addiction problems by the looks of what I saw as I drove by. That she had a high probability of drug addiction as she was slumped over. And I judged this scene as ugly. I drove by and I just said, "Oh my God," And it was heartbreaking to see what I knew was a beautiful young woman in that state. I mean, who wouldn't see that as ugly in a sense, right? But this young teenager, as she was sitting there, like almost coma-like and filthy, Spirit showed me in a flash, just a moment in a flash, and showed me in my mind's eye that she was beautiful and that her angels were all around her. There was all this light around her, and the angels were with her. And they told me that she wouldn't always be doing that. She wouldn't always be that way. But she was doing exactly as her soul needed her to do at that time. And I just thought, how do you just accept that? It was in that instant I had to listen, but it was still a struggle in my rational mind. She was doing exactly as her soul wanted to do. And they showed me that she would move on from that time in her life, and she would recover, and she was going to be fine. And I thought, man, the path of what I'm seeing right now for her, I judged it as a particular way. But Spirit doesn't do that. The loving God of the universe, the fabric of the universe, doesn't judge that way. And it was really beautiful in how the Spirit of God showed me what they see. And it was to that saying of "be as thou art," of what not the Mayans, but the Andes teach and what that word means. So I have another example of how to connect with the Earth's energy. A friend of mine, Michael Drake, he, at this time, it was quite a few years ago, he was making a drumming CD. He's a shaman. He was making a drumming CD. And he was trying to record it, of course. And nothing was coming. All of a sudden, he was completely tapped out in creativity. Nothing was coming. Then all of a sudden, his creativity started to flow. And then his CD got finished in record time, in a sense. And he was no longer stuck, and he was able to have this creativity just come through him. Well, what he realized later was that the time that his creativity kicked in is when there was a big old oil leak down in the Gulf of Mexico. And when his creativity stopped is when they capped it. I thought, that's really far-fetched. However, it goes to show that we are connected with all that is. We say that so easily, that we're all connected to all that is, but it means we really are. His creativity came from really deep within him. He didn't even understand it at the time where this was coming, this upswell of creativity. That, where did it come from? He hadn't experienced it like that before, and then poof, it was done. And he realized that he had tapped into the energies of the earth, and the earth was experiencing this eruption from within, from deep within. And as a part of the earth, as a part of the soil, as a part of the water of the planet, we are all one. And he experienced that upswelling of creativity, is the way he experienced it. Somebody else in a different frame of mind might have had a different experience, but him, and being the shaman and connected to the planet the way he was, that was the way he experienced. And I thought, wow, what if we all did stuff like that? What if we all tapped in to the energies of the planet for what we need, whether it's creativity or, writing a story or, some material good. It's all available to us in the energy of the planet. So we can harness nature and the elements in that way and use them to our best good for this great outcome. There's another story I have about a friend of mine who went to an herb conference. And what I'm going to share is Connie can relate to this too. She went to a workshop, and the instructor was telling them to pay attention to what shows up in your yard, what shows up around you. And it's telling you something. It's bringing you its medicine. It's bringing you its potency. It's bringing you its value. Well, this woman in the class, she gasped when she heard that. It's like, oh my gosh, something clicked in her mind. And what she realized was that she had had that year a plethora of foxglove show up at her door. And it was so abundant at her door that it was actually coming around the corner and going in. Are you familiar with foxglove? It's this tall plant, beautiful purple flowers on it. Well, it was actually coming around and going in her door. But what was going on in her life at that time is she was experiencing a very bitter and ugly divorce. And it was heartbreaking. What she was going through was heartbreaking. Well, foxglove it's where they get digitalis from, and it's for the heart. And so the plant kingdom showed up for her. The plant kingdom came to support her and to be there energetically at her door, at her front door. So she goes by it every time she enters her house, which is a whole nother metaphor. In dream, you can go through dream interpretation and kind of pick apart what all that means. But it goes to show, it's a perfect example of how the oneness of all that is supports us at all times in this most loving and benevolent way. So I know Connie pays attention to that too. Before it was COVID, we had COVID. You had mullein showing up all over your yard. Yeah, her and I did a little podcast on it. The mullein was huge. It was almost as tall as this room, I think, that year before COVID. Well, mullein is for your lungs. So it's like, ooh, what's coming? Yeah. So it's fascinating how we are supported and loved. So the wisdom of the plants is part of that as well, part of our oneness and how we walk our medicine way. So to walk the medicine way is to walk in balance with no harm to anyone, not even yourself. And sometimes that's hard with our self-talk. We all have a story that's living inside of us. And how are we telling that story, not only with our words, but with our actions and our reactions? Sometimes our reactions to things tell us more about the story we're holding inside of us than our actual actions. Somebody can do something and we fly off the handle for no reason. It's like, whoa, what story have you got inside of you? Ooh. Yeah. So we're telling our stories in everything that we do. If someone reacts to us with rage and anger, that's telling the story of what's inside of them. If they're jealous and they're saying, don't go talk to her, don't talk to him, because they're jealous, that tells the story inside of him. And the story is that I won't get my needs met. The story is there's not enough for me. That's the story that they're telling by those kinds of actions. So when you can stay as the observer in their story and stay heart-centered in your story, you're walking the medicine way. Got that? It's kind of hard. I mean, it sounds kind of convoluted. Stay as the observer in their story. As they're reacting, stay the observer and just observe. Don't engage. And then stay in your heart in your story. And that's the medicine way. That's how we want to be. It's important. Several years ago, I was at a conference workshop with James O'D, and we later went out to lunch, and it was really a delightful time. And in our conversations between the workshop and our luncheon was very enlightening. We were talking about all the different things in the world and politics and hunger and water resources and inhumane behaviors. But he also said that he believes he's witnessing the new human, which ties back to the ancient prophecies. He says, I'm witnessing the new human emerging. And James, he gets called, or at that time, I'm not sure what he's doing now, but at that time he was being called into these countries to help the governments after they had had really bad events. And this particular time he had just come back from Rwanda, and he was asked as a consultant by the government to help them sort out the events, the consequences of the events in the human heart, and to try to bring reconciliation for people. And the government was doing everything they could to deeply support forgiveness after the genocide that they had experienced. And he said in Rwanda and other countries that he'd been working with, the average human is so tired of wars. They don't want it. The people themselves don't want it. They don't want the burden of hatred, even though it might be being laid on them by the powers that be. It's not theirs. They don't want hatred anymore. The average human have had enough of the tragic sufferings. And he's saying that the people are saying, I want the freedom of forgiveness. There's freedom in forgiveness. I want reconciliation, is what they were saying. So he had the privilege of watching, he told this story, he had the privilege of watching this woman who had her children killed, and she had been mutilated by the enemy in this Rwanda genocide. And he had the privilege of seeing her standing before her assailants and having the assailants say to her, I'm sorry, I just got caught up in the violence. They didn't, even the perpetrators didn't want it. They just got caught up in it. And she recited back to them Psalm 23. Though I walk through the valley in the shadow of death, I fear no evil. She had no hatred in her heart. She was willing to let it go. The people that had created the atrocity were willing to let it go. And they were having healing taking place in a very deep level. What a remarkable people in the country for the government to say we want forgiveness for our people. So they created that environment to happen. So he said, this is the new human. The new human is evolving beyond grudges. It's the body is of the new human is so light that the burden of darkness is too heavy. And this is the new medicine that the ancient ones were talking about. In the book Testimony of Light, there is a line that Sister Frances says, and she says, in the afterlife, the subjective becomes the objective. Wow, I sat with that one for a long time after I read that. When I read a book, I read something like that, and then I have to close the book. I have to live it for a while. I can't even move on in the book. It's like, oh, what does that mean? What does it look like? And anyway, so that came to life for me. So what you're experiencing now is having things happen to you. In this human life, we experience things happening to us. And then in the afterlife, we see that event from the observer's point of view. Then we observe it. So the subjective becomes objective. So I'm thinking, if we do our homework now and we look at things from an objective point of view, instead of happening to us, we observe it happening, that we'll be further ahead. We'll be at the top of the class or maybe even skip a grade when we get to the other side. I don't know, but we'll still be way ahead. We'll do our homework today. We'll do our homework now. And what really matters at the end of all of that is our relationship with God, our relationship with Source, of whatever that power is that's greater than us. To use the phrase that John Eels, that usually sits up here, he just said a few weeks ago, what others think of us is none of my business, or what the others think of me is none of my business. That was cute. So in a way, that's exactly pertinent here, to be the observer of what's happening, to be objective. It's like what they're doing isn't my business. So on the other side of the veil, the only thing that matters is my objective of how I handled it. How did I handle me? That's what we look at. How did we handle ourselves? Not about the other person, but about ourselves. So you have a unique identity, a unique spirit, a unique essential nature. You have potential with a capital P to signify your potential that you brought into this life, into this world. And you are very special and you're one of a kind. No one's like you. So it matters that you're here. It matters that you're here on earth. It matters that you're living life, and hopefully to the fullest and the best capacity that you have. So walk the medicine way by being true to yourself and and live with an open heart, compassion, and a deep appreciation for life. So we're going to go into a little meditation. Get yourself comfortable. Take a nice deep breath. Just release any concerns or worries that you might have that you came in with. And in your imagination, create a space in nature that nurtures you. Imagine this place that you go to in your mind's eye that's beautiful. It might be a meadow, it might be by a river, it might be deep in the forest, it might be in the desert. The desert is beautiful as well. It could be at the ocean. And see yourself in that special place in your mind, feeling the feelings of nature nurturing you, sustaining you, giving you everything that you need in this world. Look around you. What are the sights that you see? What are the sounds that you're hearing? What animals are present, if any? Are they close to you? Are they off in the distance? Are they interacting with you? Or are they just doing their own thing? What plants are around you? And now tune into the messages that each one of these things in your environment have to say to you. What are the plants saying to you? What messages do they have to bring you? What messages do the animals have to say to you? What does the wind have to say to you? Allow these messages to come into your awareness, into your soul, into your heart, and give deep gratitude for any of the elements or elementals that gave you a message, gave you guidance, information, whatever it might be, acknowledgement of your presence, perhaps. And tell them thank you for being there. Thank you for being a part of your world and allowing you to be a part of theirs. And hold this message very dear to your heart as you contemplate it throughout the week. Bring yourself back into the room, knowing that that place is always going to be there. You can go to it any time for solace, for guidance. Bring yourself back into the room. When you're ready, wiggle your toes and open your eyes. All right, everybody back? Doing okay? Everybody take off and leave into the cosmos? Yeah? It was a short trip. Sorry about that. But you can go back there anytime. All right, so we're going to get our gift ready for the home center, that which supports the home center for us and those yet to come. Oh, it's down below. There you go. And put it between your hands. Give it your loving energy of oneness, knowing that this is just the flow of the universe, that we are already abundant. We are already so blessed. And the home center receives it with a grateful and an open heart, sending it back out into the universe to come back to you and bless you 100 times with all of your wants, needs, and desires that are going to serve your highest and your greatest good. And let that be so. Lynn's going to be bringing the basket around, and then I'm going to invite Dick back up for his closing statement and closing prayer. We'll close out our broadcast, and I'll come back and give the announcements.
Today's closing statement is from the book Remembering Who You Truly Are, God's Day 326, Acceptance. To love what is. Learn to love what is. Love it just as it is. Trying to change someone in your life to what you think they should be or act like won't work. Holding back your acceptance of love only aggravates the situation. Instead, love and bless the holy presence of God in them, beyond what you find hard to accept. That includes loving yourself just the way you are, too. Look with the eyes of God and see the perfection beyond the appearances. Isn't that how you want others to look at you? You want them to see through your outer faults to the beauty and goodness lie latent in you, the perfect isness. So today, remember to look past the outer and love that isness. Not a real word. Our closing prayer. It's perspective today. It helps me occasionally to step back and take a different view of life. In my view, our future is not beyond our efforts. I believe it is within our sight. What we accomplish in our lifetimes may only be a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is this intelligent universe we live in. Yet I believe everything we do is complete, when and where we leave it. Just as no statement we make says all that should be said, no prayer can fully express our love. Yet, with that prayer, we have planted the seeds that one day will grow. We water those seeds, knowing that they hold a future. The sense of liberation in realizing that we cannot do everything will enable us to do something, and to do it very well. We may think the something may be incomplete, but it's a beginning, a start, a step along the way. We may never see the end results, but that's the difference between being the intelligent universe and being a light worker. We know the light and the love. We become the prophets of a future that is ours and our children's. We are the glue that holds things together. And because of that, this intelligent universe is still here. Amen. YouTube and Facebook, that ends our service from the Home Spiritual Center today. We are out.